we conducted a survey of our 250,000 members in the city of Chicago to find out what their top issues were and whether they were going to vote in the upcoming municipal elections. It's no surprise that safety was part of the equation, but it wasn't the only thing. In fact, older adults 50 plus identified affordability, essential services, and what we call livable communities as critical top issues that concern them. We also learned that 86% of older adults 50 plus were likely to vote in the municipal elections.
Wow. Look, I'm one of them. And from what we've seen, it's older voters who will determine the outcome of the last election and will also do on April 4th. Do you think that these issues have been addressed by the candidates?
Well, by and large, no, not as much as we'd like. But I want to be clear about one thing. The media bears some responsibility in this because they didn't always ask these questions or didn't report on these issues enough. AARP Illinois met with all nine of the candidates prior to the February election, and they all told us they were willing to work on these issues with us and to be educated on them. Well, if there's one thing that AARP is good at, it's advocacy, from the halls of Congress to the state capitol, but also from the county to the city. We're committed at AARP Illinois to advocating on behalf of the issues of older adults, 50 plus, and their families, and to hold all of our elected officials accountable.
Thank you, Alvaro. I can't agree with you more. News outlets need to do a better job of being inclusive of all voting blocs and their concerns. Now, let's get into these issues. According to the AARP survey, your members are feeling like they're being forced out of their homes due to rising property tax rates, skyrocketing utility bills, and a lack of affordable alternatives. 43% of voters 50 plus in Chicago have thought of leaving the city, and one of the main reasons was because of the high cost of living. Let's now hear from AARP member Jane Light.
Hi, I'm Jane Light, and I live in the Lakeview neighborhood of Chicago. When I retired, my plan was to stay in Chicago and enjoy all the things the city has to offer. But as I age, it becomes more expensive to continue living here. One of the costs that just keeps climbing is the cost of utilities. My friends and I have seen our gas and electric bills skyrocket. While the utilities talk about making improvements in efficiency, utility customers like us continue to see increases in rates year over year. What we want to know is what can be done to stop the gas and electric utilities from asking regulators to approve higher rates for consumers?
Good question. Our first guest is Abe Scar, Director of Illinois PRG. Abe, here's an issue that directly is affecting every single person in Chicago. In AARP survey, more than 1/3 of older adults say they are struggling to keep up or failing or falling behind financially. It seems like the cost of utilities has just skyrocketed over the last several years. Why are our utility bills so high, and what can be done about it?
Well, it's an excellent question, and thank you to AARP for having me join the discussion today. There's a couple parts to the question, so I want to take them piece by piece. Why they've raised recently, what's going on right now, and what you and the listening audience can do about it. So first, the reason our bills have gone up, in particular in the last couple of years, dates back to a decade of public policy passed here in Illinois, starting with the 2011 law that was passed as part of the ComEd bribery scheme that's in the news every day now because of the trial. I'm going to try not to get into too much utility regulation, but one thing you need to know about utilities is that when they spend money on their infrastructure, that increases our rates and increases their opportunity to profit. And that's been the case for a long time, but what these public policy changes did was supercharge that incentive for utilities, made them more interested in spending as much money as they could, as fast as they could, and removed some of the normal regulatory checks on that spending. And so what we've seen is an explosion of spending by the electric utilities, ComEd here in Chicago, and the gas utilities who had a similar policy, a bill surcharge known as QIP. They've both done enormous spending over the last decade that's steadily increased our utility bills. So for ComEd customers, the delivery rates have gone up by just under 50%. And for People's Gas customers, that surcharge has increased to around $15 per month or $180 per year, again, because of this public policy. The other thing that's just happened in the last couple years is that energy prices have gone up significantly. So there's two parts of your utility bill: the delivery charges that you pay to the utility and the price of power itself, whether that's electricity or gas. And the energy prices were actually low significantly for the last decade, and they kind of hid those delivery rate increases, so people may not have noticed it as much because the power price was so low. But just over the last couple of years, people have gotten hit with the double whammy of the much higher delivery rates and the much higher power prices. And people are struggling. We see the data from the utilities. People in Chicago are increasingly struggling to keep up with their bills. Now, that's what's happened in the past. What's happening now is that every major utility in Illinois is coming into state regulators known as the Illinois Commerce Commission and is pushing an even bigger increase before regulators. So People's Gas has filed for the largest gas utility rate hike in Illinois history. It would be a over $400 million increase that would raise average bills by about $142 per year. ComEd, they're proposing rate hikes for the next 4 years that would total $1.5 billion, raising average bills by more than $200 per year. Now, as the question asker suggested, some of this spending that they're doing is good things that I at least think is good. Investing in energy efficiency, getting our grid, our electrical grid ready to take in more clean energy as we transition to more clean energy. But the question for regulators is all this spending worth it? And is it happening at the right pace such that our bills are not increasing too quickly? And I know my organization, AARP, others will be before regulators, asking them to temper these rate hikes, to not raise people's rates so quickly, so fast. So finally, what folks can do, first, stay involved with AARP. They do great advocacy on these issues, both at the State House and before regulators. You can make a public comment to the Illinois Commerce Commission in writing through their website, or you can actually go to their meetings and make a public comment. And I think it's really important that they hear from the public. They don't actually hear that much from normal people. They hear a lot from utility lawyers and advocacy organizations, but they need to know that the public is paying attention and wants them to keep these rate hikes in check. And I think we have a great opportunity because Governor Pritzker just named 3 new members to the Commerce Commission. It's a 5-member board, and I think they're a lot more consumer friendly than the commission we've had, generally speaking, over the last decade. So we do have an opportunity if we can get those public comments in and get the commission to know that the public wants them to keep these rate hikes in check. Finally, if you're struggling personally to keep up with your utility bills, you can always negotiate with the utility. Some of the laws we've passed in recent years puts more responsibility on the utility to work with people in good faith if they're struggling to pay their bills, and there are options. You can also see if you qualify for affordability programs like LIHEAP and PEP. These are specific programs to help people afford their bills. And finally, there's legislation pending in the Illinois General Assembly that would put more resources into these programs to help people with their bills. So you can always call your state representative, state senator, and say that your people are struggling with their utility bills and they should do more to help.
Staying informed, very important. And of course, having your voices heard from elected officials. Thank you, Abe. Let's take on another one of the big issues that were identified by AARP members, which is the issue of essential services. AARP members say that they are deeply concerned that there are not adequate essential services for them to be able to age in the city and be with their families. Services such as mental health services, home and community-based services, and access to quality health care. Let's hear from another AARP member, Karen Price.
Hi, my name is Karen Price, and I live in the Avalon Park neighborhood of Chicago. My concern is about making sure older adults in Chicago have the essential services they need to live independently in their homes. I have friends caring for their parents while they are juggling other family responsibilities and they still work, and it's very stressful for them. How can people work and care for their parents at the same time? What can be done to make sure that the older adults have the services they need and the caregivers are supported in their daily roles caring for their parents? Thank you.
Caregiving is core for many families. As a Latino, it's embedded in our culture. We take care of our own. To help us take a deeper look at this, our next guest is Edgar Ramirez, CEO of Chicago Commons. Edgar, there's a lot to unpack here, but why don't we try? I think that Linda's bringing up here, what Linda's bringing up here is the lack of accessible services for older adults, especially seniors who may have few resources and don't know where to even go.
Bueno, gracias, Hugo, and I'm happy to be here. Buenas noches. Buenas tardes. My name is Edgar Ramirez, and I'm the president and CEO of Chicago Commons, an agency that provides critical services to older adults with disabilities across the metropolitan area. And first, thank you to AARP for having us here today on this important topic. It's a great question. Services for older adults are essential. They allow older adults to live independently, age in place, and thrive in community. And they also support those caring for them, often their adult children, sometimes grandchildren, who manage their daily lives. As you said, Hugo, this is part of our culture. This is what we do. I'm a caregiver myself. I know my friend Alvaro from ARP is also a caregiver as well. There's many of us in the city providing these critical services for our parents. Chicago Commons, we provide home-based and center-based supports for older adults. Through our adult day services, older adults often have a home away from home, where we provide transportation, nutritious meals, exercise programs, social activities, and health monitoring. We also have an on-site nurse, which is really important for those seniors who need on-site care on a daily basis. And through our home care program, we provide older adults with an aide who assists older adults with personal care, health monitoring, housekeeping, meal prep, and shopping, specialty care in areas such as Alzheimer's, diabetes, and Parkinson's disease. As you can imagine, this is a godsend for families and a respite for caregivers such as ourselves. Throughout the city, there are other services such as home delivered meals, transportation assistance, caregiver support groups, and more. And many people watching right now are adults who are caring for a parent and are living the stresses of, how am I going to get my parent to their doctor appointment? How am I going to have a safe home for my parents when I'm not there? And, these are all critical questions that we're all struggling through. And at the principal point, we all do not want to put our parent in a nursing home. And we were doing everything possible for them not to get to that space. These are essential services, as well as those caregiving services, which are essential for seniors in the city, but also the city itself. And it's time that we invest critically in these services, make known the services that are available currently for seniors in the city, but also look to policy change, as Abe was saying earlier, to reinvest more into this critical population, because now is the time.
Thank you, Edgar. I want to stay on this subject for a bit and bring back Alvaro. Alvaro, what is missing in terms of essential services at the city level? How can it be better?
Hugo, Chicago's essential services for older adults are completely fragmented. The COVID-19 pandemic has only made it worse, right? So most families have absolutely no idea where to go, or even that some services are available, unless they're referred by a friend, a family member, or a doctor. As Edgar said, I'm a caregiver as well. I take care of my 91-year-old mom and my 83-year-old uncle. I'm lucky because I have access to a lot of information, but not everybody knows where to go. And with over a third of the population in Chicago over 50 and getting older, it's an issue. It's an issue that the next mayor must address. Look, The Illinois Department of on Aging is its own department. It's not buried within another department like Chicago's is. There are cities like Boston, which have made a motto called Boston Age Strong. They have a commission, and this commission coordinates all of the services in the city of Boston to make sure that all families and communities have access to the services. It's a one-stop shop for older adults to get access to services ranging from health to transportation to housing and so many other things. Chicago really needs to follow suit on this.
Yeah, there are certainly best practices and lessons learned in Illinois and elsewhere to draw from. As someone, as a second generation Latino, proud son of immigrant parents, my family's going through this for the first time. Both you and Edgar talked about there's a lack of information, and my family right now is dealing with a family member that has dementia. So we're going through caregiving for the first time, and certainly are educating ourselves on how to best help our parents. Another issue that was high on AARP members' minds was what AARP calls livable communities. Let's hear from Toya Hemingway, another AARP member.
Hello, my name is Toya Hemingway from the Beverly neighborhood in Chicago, and my concern is that communities are safe and livable for older adults like me. I worry about individuals who find it difficult and unsafe to walk in our neighborhoods. How can we make sure that our communities are safe, walkable, that we have transportation options, access to grocery stores, and opportunities for residents of all ages and abilities to participate in community life?
Thank you, Toya. When some people talk about safety, they tend to look at it strictly from a linear perspective, but it's so much more than that. To help us address this large issue area is Claude Robinson, president of Onyx Strategies Partners, LLC.
Good evening, Hugo. And I want to thank AARP for the invite to be here to talk about such pressing issues for a large segment of society. And Onyx Strategic Partners is a multidisciplinary, purpose-led strategic business consulting firm that's focused on corporate social responsibility, organizational program design, government and community relations, and DEI. So I get an opportunity to work in government, corporate, nonprofit, philanthropic, and in the community. So I get a chance to do top roots and grassroots almost every day. And I would say to the issue of public safety, I know it's rose to the top of every community here in Chicago. And there's what's called quality of life plans that are normally put together to look at how community stakeholders can come together and build quality of life plans that focus on public safety, economic development, housing, education. And I've been blessed to be a part of plans in North Lawndale, also in South Shore, and in the Austin neighborhoods as well. And I found that a lot of times seniors have been a part of it, but then there's a huge chasm where young people aren't a part of these plans as well. So it's almost as if plans are being put in place without having the voice of many young people. And then what happens then is that young people don't feel a part of something, then they're not going to participate in it. And in actuality, the time that they could be doing something that's going to help revitalize a community, they end up rebelling against it. So I would say, for one, for when we look at Gen Z and younger millennials and older millennials as well, that there has to be consistent conversation and collaboration with those groups to look at how we can address these issues. I think back to the lived experiences of each of those generations. They're different. Young people who in Gen Z or younger millennials have never had to pick up that phone, and dial anything like that or push the button. They've never had anything like that. And when you look at it, it's the issue of patience and harmony in a community. Everything's fast from their perspective. It's not their fault. It's what they've grown to know. And then if you look at Gen X and boomers, patience is something that's there a little bit more. So I would say that when we talk about public safety, young people don't look at it the same way that older generations do. So if there's a way that we can have consistent communication and intergenerational relationships with young people, that can get at some of the issues of public safety, where young people are seen and they're actually heard and feel appreciated, instead of currently what I've seen around the city is both groups are looking at each other with the side eye, and there's no real relationship there. So those things I think are vitally important when we talk about safety. A lot of young people are afraid themselves, and a lot of older generations are afraid as well. So that issue of fear, if we can get at that, is such an important part of changing the narrative in communities. But in Chicago, and even amongst Black and Brown communities, and Hugo, that's why I applaud the work of the Latino Policy Forum and other groups that came together to share their perspectives to these mayoral candidates on what's important to our communities. We can't continue to stay divided as well, because then communities won't be livable at all. But if we're able to bring people to the table, and I saw this happen brilliantly during the pandemic in North Lawndale and then Little Village, when the looting was going on, we were able to coalesce meetings with all of the folks that were out in the streets, the street organizations, and trying to change the narrative of what was happening, and was able to call a truce to what was going on in various communities. So the things I would say was, if we can build these intergenerational exchanges between young people and older adults, that would be one. And the other thing, when we talk about safety for elders, I also see cyber terrorists and cyber security as something that's also killing and our communities as well. Supposedly, I was at Camp Lejeune last week, and I got a text message from somebody that said I was owed, I could pick up $75,000. But I also see that as a real threat to safety in communities as well.
Well, absolutely. I think we got to talk to each other, right? And listen to each other when it comes to all of these different issues, because it not only affects one certain voting block, but all of us. And I think events like tonight's event are very important for both candidates, Brandon Johnson and Paul Vallas, to listen to. We've mentioned previously how the media needs to do a better job of being inclusive of different voices and different perspectives. And I'm certainly appreciative to you and our other guests for providing that into tonight's events. This has been a great conversation. And what a way to wrap up AARP's voter education campaign. Alvaro, any last questions? Any last words? Sorry.
Sorry, I was unmuting myself. Well, I just wanted to, kind of jump in. Claude got me going. He talked about quality of life plans, and I think that those, I'm very familiar with those, having worked in community, and I think those are great, right? Because they're comprehensive ways to really look at a community, right, from different perspectives. And I think that, the next mayor needs to be paying attention, as you said, Hugo, right, to what the community is looking at, because they're really looking at, right. It's easy to say, oh, very linearly, right? So, there's safety, there's, and kind of have them separated. But as this conversation is telling us and showing us, right? So can people afford to stay in their homes, right? What Abe just brought up at the beginning. Did anybody even look at their gas bill or their light bill? I'm guilty of, probably until I met Abe some years ago, who was bringing this up, and I was like, well, wait a minute, let me take a look at this. It's why do I always get this surcharge, right, on there? But so that's an important thing, and how can we be involved? And one of the things that Claude brought up, right, was these plans, and I was just thinking about like some of the issues that AARP is working on, such as the ADU ordinance, right? How do we do things that can help people stay in their homes, right? Stay in their communities, right? Because to Edgar's point, people want to be where they age where they live. People want to and they should, right? They've worked hard their whole lives. So we're looking at things from these other lots of different perspectives, and things are really tied in together, and we're hoping that this really brings all of these issues, and hopefully sparking conversations across generations and in communities. So Claude, I just wanted to give you a shout out also for getting me all worked up on the quality of life plans, which I've worked on several.
Yes. I was going to add to it. I originally grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And as I was growing up, I didn't have a context of community like we do now as adults. It was just where you lived. And I remember I grew up in the Germantown area of Philadelphia. And I used to have to walk from Germantown to my cousin's house. And there were blocks that I would walk down that were fully Italian. And I would walk down as a young African-American boy, walk through the Italian neighborhood, and it was just friendly. How's everything going today? How was school? And these weren't my parents at all, but they cared about the community. And I'm certain it was a lower poverty community, but you did not have a lot of what's happening now where people don't feel invested in that community because they really aren't investing in themselves at all. And it's an opportunity for all of us as leaders to find ways to really invest in each other every day so that we're adding to the moral fabric of our communities as well.
I agree, Claude. I think coalition building is so important, right? And tonight's meeting is representative of that. 4 different organizations coming together, having conversations of what matters most to all voters in this election. And we need to have more of that because I think we have a lot more in common than the things that separate us. And I think the more, instead of pulling for our side, the more conversations we can have like this, the more exchange of ideas, the better better informed voters we're going to be, and strengthen numbers. Right, when we're asking elected officials for to complete those promises, there's strengths in numbers and having a unified voice. Edgar, Abe, any parting words before we say goodnight?
I totally echo the comments that were made today. Claude, you brought up a really critical idea, and that touches on what Alvaro stated in the beginning, the idea that what the city lacks is a quality of life plan for seniors. And the idea that seniors can go to a table and frame out their needs that covers what you just said, safety, costs of living, essential services, these key things. What does that look like from a macro framework in the city? And how can seniors themselves be a part of the solution, not only from a policy perspective, but also from an everyday perspective as well, right? How do they get information better? How do they receive information? How can they critique the current city's infrastructure of how it serves them? These are questions that we have to engage seniors so they can answer it themselves, right? And Claude, you're touching on another key piece, right? The Black and Brown voice and the opportunity for Black and Brown seniors to frame out what's important to them, because we all know that seniors who are living in neighborhoods that are Black and Brown are probably the most underserved, right? And so how can we reach those voices and hear from their perspective of what they're seeing. These are the folks who have been in the neighborhoods for many years. I think about Alvaro's mom and their story in Pilsen, right? Alvaro, the Obregon family is probably a staple in Pilsen. What has Alvaro's mom seen that she can comment on sort of the trajectory of where Pilsen has been and where it should go, right? And so this is a great conversation. I'm hoping it stimulates with the candidates, the opportunity to engage seniors on a different level from a policy perspective, what Abe was stating, from a neighborhood perspective, from Claude and what I was saying. These are critical. This is a critical moment that the candidates should embrace and seize, and engage voters on the opportunity that they have at hand.
Institutional knowledge is so important, right? So that the next generation doesn't make the same mistakes as the previous generation. And as you said, look, we're living longer, right? We're living healthier lives. So we're going to be around for a long time, and our voices need to be heard just as much as the young folks coming up. Abe, any parting words?
Yes, thank you. And I was just reflecting on the value of something like a quality of life plan for seniors, for everyone in the city. I'm not a senior, but I sure hope to become one and live a long and fruitful life. And even now, I'm sure that the type of things that would get developed in a quality of life plan for seniors would benefit me and my family now. One thing that, for me connects some of the issues we've talked about with aging in place and safety is transportation, which, the CTA and the challenges with the CTA has gotten some well-deserved attention in the race. And I'm glad to hear that, because that's a vital resource for the city of Chicago. But those who know me, Alvaro knows this, I'm a biker. I bike year round, and the safety of our streets for walking and biking is also critical. We have countless injuries and deaths because of traffic accidents throughout the year. And I know I'd like to see safer streets for all of us, such that we can feel safe walking around in our communities, again, which would improve the quality of life for seniors and for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to create an environment where everyone feels safe, as well as the services, in order to enjoy a wonderful city that's filled with lots of culture and different activities year round, and especially during the months of spring and the summer. Well, listen, I want to thank all of our guests today: Abe Scar, Director of Illinois PRG; Edgar Ramirez, CEO, Chicago Commons; Claude Robinson, President, Onyx Strategic Partners, LLC; Alvaro Obregon, Associate State Director for Advocacy and Outreach at AARP Illinois; and of course, you, the public, for joining us tonight. We're 1 week away from a very important election, which will determine who will be our next mayor. If you are eligible to vote, please do so. Make your voices heard. It's been a pleasure to be with AARP Illinois and our guests. I'm Hugo Balta, publisher of Illinois Latino News. Our coverage focuses on the social determinants of health and democracy. Muchísimas gracias y buenas noches.